name is Bailey Richards, and I'm originally from Cincinnati. Specifically, I'm actually originally from a small town just outside of Cincinnati called New Richmond. It is a river town. It's right on the Ohio River, and every 20 or so years it floods. It floods majorly, and so every 20 or so years we'll have a completely town-altering flood. And so the flood will completely shut down all of the businesses, and everything has to basically be rebuilt after that. The last one that I lived through was 1998. There was a really bad one the year before that in 1997. And so I just kind of grew up seeing my hometown, get destroyed and then rebuilt, destroyed and then rebuilt. And right now it's actually a really cool town. They've got lots of little restaurants, lots of things using the river. They've made some changes to make hopefully the next big flood and cleanup effort, which will inevitably happen, go a little smoother. So that's a little bit about where I'm from as far as that goes. I graduated high school in 2006 and then immediately went to the University of Louisville, where I studied fine art, and I did a focus in photography, which led me to journalism. Yep. And I ended up being a journalist for a while, and I moved to Hazard for that. But while I was in college, I did one summer with the Appalachia Service Project, which was the first time that I had ever been to Hazard. Was in 2007, the summer of 2007, and the reason I came to Hazard was because I fell off of the jumping rock at Carr Creek Lake, and I ended up having to get stitched up at Hazard ARH when I was 18 years old. So that was the first and only time I had been to Hazard before I moved here, which is not exactly a great first impression. But I was doing work in Knott County, so I ended up getting stitched up at Hazard ARH. And then after that, I finished my photography degree in 2010, which was right when newspapers were laying off all of their photojournalists and a lot of the journalists, because it was a big conversion from paper to online. And when that happened, it was really hard for me to find journalism gigs. I was doing some freelance gigs here and there for the Cincinnati Enquirer and some of their subsidiaries, but it wasn't enough to actually make a job. So I started applying for a lot of small papers, figuring that newspapers always need a journalist, regardless of how big they are, and it may be something that I could find something in a smaller market better than in a larger market. So I started applying all over the place, and I ended up getting contacted by Chris Ritchie at the Hazard Herald. And for about 3 months, because he told me that he had a journalist that was about to go back to school, I just sent him stuff for like 3 months. I sent him just random stories I would write. I would do random videos and send them to him. I would do photo montages of just completely, I wasn't hired by anyone to do any of this. I just wanted a job really bad, and he was the only person that was contacting me. So I just sent him stuff for like 3 months. I'm sure he's probably got some of that, and I'm sure it's all terrible. But I moved to Hazard in June of 2011, and that's how I got here. My first impression was, that's a good question. I don't know how positive it was. I mean, I was really excited because I had already been offered the job before I came down. I had my interview and everything like that. A little bit online, a little bit over the phone. So when I came down, it was really just to find a place to live. And so that was really hard to do. So I came down just to meet with the people at the Hazard Herald and then just find an apartment. And I had a really hard time finding an apartment. I found a place that I thought was going to work. It looked pretty good the first time that I went through it. I came back 2 weeks later to actually move in, had all of my worldly possessions in a truck with my mom, and we go to walk in to move everything in after I've signed the lease, and there's someone passed out in the hallway and there's a broken window. All of a sudden in this apartment that I thought looked pretty good when I came down before. So I had 2 days, because I was starting work that Monday, to find a place to live. I got really lucky. I found a really great landlord, Ed Williams, who owns the Double E Gun Shop, and I lived above that for 2 years. But yeah, the first time I came down was rough, just because you get thrown into a place that doesn't have a great amount of housing, and then you're told you need to find a place within a few hours, because I was only here for a few hours the first time. So I worked for the Hazard Herald for about a year and a half, and sometime during that first year, I was asked to be on their board of directors. They were looking for people that had housing situations and that were low income, and that was me at the time. And so they added me to their board. I was on their board for about a year, and then they had a position come open. And so I applied for that job. I resigned from the board. And around that same time, I started meeting more people. I started to get to know the Williams sisters really well. I started to get to know some of what were called the Amera Five at the time. It was a group of AmeriCorps and Vistas that had come down that were just incredibly active, and they all lived in this one house. And so they started inviting me to things, different stuff that the organizations they were working for were doing. So I started getting invited to stuff through the Housing Development Alliance, things through Envision Hazard, things through the Foundation for Appalachia, Kentucky, and I just started going to all of it because even though I had lived here for a year and a half at that point, I still didn't know that many people. I was kind of just seen as, the reporter, so I had met a ton of people, but I wasn't friends with a lot of people because it was kind of that distant relationship. So switching to working for the Housing Development Alliance, meeting a lot of these younger people that had come in to do all this different kind of work, really that's how I started getting involved. And then after that, I just realized that I had a passion for it. And so I started volunteering for a lot of different things. That was how I started getting involved with a lot of stuff, was through that. That's a really good question. That's a long time ago now, so now I have to think about that. So I actually started going to Arts Alliance board meetings probably 6 or 8 months before I was put on the board. I had a fine art degree. I was looking for stuff to kind of sink my teeth into. I was young, I was single, I had a lot of free time, and so I just started going to their board meetings until finally they put me on the board. But as far as a project with any of them, there was some events that Envision Hazard was doing, and there was some art projects and things like that Envision Hazard was doing. I don't know how much. Do you want me to say anything about the Tiny Doors? Because there's still people that don't know that I did it. The Tiny Doors actually spun out of a different project that I had started to kind of do. So I had this idea by doing some of the work with Envision Hazard that people just don't notice the positives anymore. It's so easy to see the things that change. And if all the things that are changing are negative, it's really easy to forget about those positive things that are staying the same. So I started this idea called Random Acts of Whimsy, and it was this idea that we would do weird little things to things that I thought were positive to kind of force people to look at them again. I think I'm probably still within the statute of limitation for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The very first one of those that I did was I decorated the Mother Goose for Halloween. And that was actually how I started dating my now husband, was I couldn't find anyone that would do it with me because they thought that it was, vandalism, which they were right. And so he just said yes. And so we put a giant cape on it and we put some magnetic fangs on it. Nothing that would hurt the building at all, and we didn't do any damage. But yeah, so we decorated the Mother Goose for Halloween to kind of get people to look at the Mother Goose again as this positive thing, this really cool thing that we have. The next thing I did after that was I hid a bunch of candies and aspirational sayings and things like that in little heart-shaped containers around town, like in planters and things like that. At some point right around that same time, myself and Amelia Holiday started doing t-shirts that had really positive things to say about Hazard on them. The first one was Hazard 7 Square Miles of Awesome. And so we just kind of had like some different products and things like that were really just all very, very positive about Hazard. And then in the process of that, I realized that when my husband and I were, it was nothing at that time, we weren't even dating, we're doing the goose, it took a while. We didn't realize how long it was going to take to actually decorate it. And so we were like up on ladders and like very visibly doing this, and there was dozens of cars driving by, and no one said anything and no one noticed, and like it wasn't on social media for like a while. I ended up actually like tipping off someone because I was like, no one's gonna see this, and then like the people are gonna come home and take it down. And that was when I realized that like people, no matter how big the gesture is, they've kind of got blinders on about the stuff that they see every day. So you really had to kind of change up what they were looking at and how it was being perceived. And so that's where the idea of the tiny doors came from. And so I started with one door. I made one because I had been asked to do a painting that I still have never finished of Holland and Collins. But I started drawing out things for this painting of Holland and Collins, and I decided to make their door because I just thought it was so neat. So I made one of them, I stuck it up, and within minutes, Jen Noble and Jill Robertson and a few other people had gone for a walk, and they noticed it and they took several pictures of it, and it blew up like crazy. So I started making a couple more. So within like the first couple of weeks of that, there was like 4 or 5 doors. And then I started noticing other people were putting little things out. There was a little swing set. There was a little door somewhere else. Someone had hung a little tiny swing from a tree. And I started just kind of noticing this stuff everywhere. And then I started looking for it, and I realized other people were too. And we never really gave a lot of context as to where the doors were. So people would have to go find them. And then more and more of these just started popping up. I think I had maybe done like 25 total during the time that I was making a lot of those. But there was like 54 total of all of them. Yeah. Yeah. So like there was a ton of them that I didn't make. And I, to this day, don't know who made a lot of those doors. Some people reached out to me and said, would it be okay if I made one? And I said, of course. But for the most part, I don't know who made a lot of the doors. And as for the reason why I stopped making tiny doors, was that I had bought a house and I was in the process of switching to a new job, and there was just a lot of things going on, and it was always an idea that I wanted to come back to, and I have come back to it a few times. We've made a few more sporadically, 1 or 2 a year, and put those out, and there's still a few of those that are still out there, and there's definitely still some of the doors out there. I would love to see people start making some of those again. I might start making some of those again. But yeah, it's never been an idea that's totally gone away. It was just one of those that I had some other things come up, and I started working on some other projects, and so it became something that I would do just in a little more like spare time type thing, as opposed to committing I committed a lot of time to that at one point. All right. So I think one of the main reasons why people thought of me for this position initially was that I am one of the few people that have recently bought a building in downtown Hazard and revitalized it and gotten it back into use. At the time, it was almost a response to the fact that I was having a hard time finding a place to buy. I had been working with the Housing Development Alliance. I had realized I really wanted to own property. So I'd been looking for houses, even fixer-upper houses, and I was having a hard time finding something that really kind of fit what I was looking for. And so when I saw a building that wasn't for sale, it had a for rent sign on it, but the for rent sign was faded and old and you could barely read it. I figured the owner of that probably would consider selling it if I threw a number at him. So I found out who the owner was, and I did that, and he accepted right away. So then it became, how do I figure out the financing of it, which was really challenging because it's not a house, so it's not quite a normal home mortgage. I couldn't get good comparables because there weren't buildings that had been turned into houses. There weren't a lot of buildings who had sold. It was it's not a home yet, so it's not homeowners insurance, it's some other kind of insurance. So there was a lot of hoops to jump through to figure out how to do it, just like logistically how to do it. Finally, I got a little lucky that I was able to find someone that would make a loan for me to do it. And they did, and they financed some of the renovations to it as well. And then we just got to work. So myself, I had friends come in and help. The Morton Construction did a lot of the work. Obviously I paid them, but they did a ton of work. And then my boyfriend at the time, now husband, like I said, he did a ton of work. And so we just got it done. And so, yeah, it ended up, I bought it in 2014 and I was able to move in February of 2015. I bought it in October 2014. I lived there until December of 2018 when my husband and I decided to buy a place in Woodland Park because we want to have kids and we needed a yard. But now the property is for rent. It's rented. It's doing really well. It still looks nice. We still maintain it. And it's kind of proven to be a good model of something that can work. Not saying that every building downtown is going to work. Not saying that every property can be revitalized like that one was. And like I said, that probably worked mostly because of sweat equity, that we did a lot of the work ourselves to cut down on a lot of the costs there. But it proved that it can be done. And that's kind of where, in my mind, the switch was made that I think that this can be done. This is a replicable model. This is something that we can do. And now we just got to figure out how to make it work for other people to do it too. About probably almost a year ago now, Carolyn Davis came to a group of us and said, I think we need to have a downtown coordinator, a downtown developer, and said, let's write a job description and take it to the city commission and see if they would do something with it. I said, I totally agree with you. I think that would be something that would be really good. So myself, and several other people, and Carolyn and Melissa Vermillion, and I honestly don't remember who all was on that committee, but we wrote a job description and we brought it to the city commission and they said, this would be great, figure out a way to fund it. And so we wrote a grant with that job description included, and it didn't get funded. But at that point, there was enough kind of momentum and feeling that this was important that Happy had just gotten elected, several new city commissioners had been elected, people that really wanted to start seeing some things happen. Scott Alexander had just been elected for his second term, and there was kind of some push that we want to start doing some stuff. So they just decided that they were going to figure out a way to just make it work. And so Scott and Happy got together and decided that they were going to split the cost of hiring someone for this position and doing all of that. And that's part of why I'm in the old courthouse and not City Hall, is that we are kind of splitting this position. Essentially they called me up, and they may have called up some other people too. I'm not totally sure, but they said, this is something that we're interested in. Would you consider doing it? Would you consider applying? And I said, yeah, I absolutely would. I met with them. And then they put the job posting up. I applied, and then lo and behold, a few months later, or not months, I guess it was a couple weeks later, they decided to hire me. I was brought to a city commission meeting where they asked me to speak because they were, Derek and Happy had decided that I was the person they were going to present to the city commission for hiring. And so they brought me to the city commissioning meeting, and the commissioners voted to have me take this position. And as far as why I believe they wanted me for this position was that I've been involved in downtown development for a long time now. I've done murals downtown. I've been involved with several of the organizations. I was involved with Pathfinders while they were doing the River Arts Greenway. I was involved with the Appalachian Arts Alliance when we're still working on the Art Station building, but as some of the things have been happening there, and that's now something that I'm taking on in this role. And so that, coupled with the fact that I did a lot of the work with Envision early on, Fantastically Hazard when we were doing the t-shirts, and when I had my house and doing all the work with that, they saw someone that had kind of thrown themselves into downtown development without getting paid and without having the time and without having the resources to do it. And they said, if this is someone that's willing to do this, for free, that's probably someone that's willing to do this, even harder and more and full time. They were right. I'm loving every minute of it, and I've been working a lot, but it's been really, really good. So now that I'm in this position, we've been working on a few different things, and by we I mean myself, the city, the county. I've been working really closely with some of the local nonprofits, Envision Hazard, places like that. And we're also working with the League of Cities and SEDC to kind of create some bigger plans. So one of the first things I did was take a look at the SEDC First Impressions report. And if you haven't seen that, I would highly suggest that you talk to someone that can get that to you. I may be able to get that to you. But essentially, the SEDC First Impressions report came from sending people that had never been to Hazard to get their first impressions. What did they think? Was it easy to find things? Were the roads easily marked? Could they find good places to eat, good places to shop, things to do? And then just recorded their responses to that. A lot of the things that I've kind of chosen to make like the quick wins, the fast stuff that we want to do, comes directly from that report. One of the things that I'm working on right now is writing a grant to do signage. We want to get signage to bring people from up on Town Mountain, up on the bypass, places like that they wouldn't necessarily come into downtown, to see that there is a downtown. There is this historic, interesting place down here. And then once we get down here, we want them to have markers to understand, the significance and the interest of some of the places, also where some of the restaurants might be, directional signs. I honestly don't know if there is a one-way sign on High Street or if that's just something all of us that live here know, and just to make some of that stuff more apparent. And so, yeah, and that's one of the things that came right out of there is how do we help people find their way once they get here? How do we help people to figure out where to go to find interesting things? Another thing that came out of that was that there was accessibility issues. Anyone that has mobility issues, wheelchairs, even strollers, things like that. It's really challenging to get around. So one of the things that we're starting to look at there is doing an accessible public bathroom for the purposes of events. So that's another grant that I'm working on right now, is to do an accessible public bathroom so that for events we've got a space that people can go and it's usable by everybody. Some other things that we're working on, we're trying to look at all of the different ways to enforce the city ordinances and codes so that buildings are maintained, and things like that. We're also working with some of the building owners to figure out how to get some businesses in some of the spaces, which is really positive. We started doing city cleanings. We are starting to look at plans for continuing beautification projects. One of the things that I'm working on is figuring out how to clean up the river so that you can actually see the river. I think the river is a really positive thing in Hazard that is pretty easily ignored because we've got a lot of overgrowth through there. So I want to make the river more of a central focal feature of downtown as opposed to just this thing that floods occasionally, because it's a beautiful place. So we're looking at some beautification efforts to get that cleaned out. I've been working with some high school students on a program that they want to do to bring in public swings. Yeah, we've just been working on all kinds of stuff, a lot of different things. Some of the very quick things are just getting people to regularly clean the streets. So we've got pressure washing going on with the fire department, and then we're also looking at either hiring some people or maybe working with drug court or some other organizations to do just regular, just sweeping, cleaning, keeping everything really nice. The last thing I would want people to know or to people to be involved in is I want to hear feedback. I want to know what people want. I can't give you what you want for your downtown if I don't know what it is. So please contact me. I'm very open. My office is in the old city court or in the old courthouse. I'm in the back hallway. Come find me if I'm not in here. My email address is bailey.richards@hazardky.gov. I want to be accessible. You can message the city's Facebook page, my own personal Facebook page. I want to know what people want out of their downtown, and then also if you have an idea, I want to help you figure out how to make that happen. Find you partners, find you small business lenders if it's a business idea, find you a nonprofit that would support you if it's a nonprofit idea. So definitely let us know, be involved, and we can't do any of this without everybody's input, or else you're going to end up with the town I want instead of the town you want, and I don't think that's what anybody wants. So thank you so much.